So my name is Brandon Muramatsu. I'm at MIT with the Office of Educational Innovation and Technology, talking about this thing we're calling Project Greenfield, a different kind of way of thinking about what we might do internally at MIT with OpenCourseware. A lot of what has been done external to MIT, but how might we use it internally at MIT? A little bit about the group that I work with, the Office of Educational Innovation and Technology. It's part of the Dean for Undergraduate Education, so we're focused on teaching and learning of undergraduates at MIT. We have this thing that we think about an innovation cycle, being able to take things that are going on in research, the work that our faculty are doing with identifying different ways of teaching their courses, looking at educational research, taking that through a cycle that incubates it, takes it from an individual faculty member looking at how they're building their resources to scaling it up. So how do you take it from one class to a number of classes, or from one course to the entire department or the university as a whole, and novel and innovative uses of technology, but really with a focus on MIT specifically. A little bit of ground rules. So I'm with the Office of Educational Innovation and Technology. I'm not with OpenCourseware. We do a lot of work with OpenCourseware, but we get to do some things that are different from their process. So I'm not representing them, and I'm not representing the institution as a whole. And the presentation will mostly be a status report. There are some reasons for that, and I think I can see Chris smiling, as I think she knows why. There are some reasons for that. We've had this conversation, and before I moved to MIT, when I was working with Causal, wouldn't it be great if MIT OpenCourseware did something, X, Y, whatever? Wouldn't it be great if you could take it, import it easily into your learning management system? Wouldn't it be great if there were quizzes that you could take and do self-assessments along the way? But we've had this question, and we had this question again earlier this year, and we were sitting around, and we kind of get stumped time and time again, because MIT OpenCourseware is a very specific thing. It's a publication of the university. It's a publication of the course materials. There's something over 2,000 different courses or elements of courses that have been published by OpenCourseware. It's not an MIT education. It doesn't grant degrees or certificates. It doesn't provide access to faculty. The materials may be complete. They may not be complete. And it certainly goes through an intellectual property scrubbing process, and it's a published whole or published container of course materials. Then we started asking this other question. So we're at MIT. Certainly we should be able to do something with OpenCourseware. We should be able to do something interesting. And then come back to the question, wouldn't it be great if we could do all of these various things? And then at some point along the way, we realized we're asking the wrong question. So instead of asking MIT OpenCourseware to change or to do all of these things, what if we started experimenting with OpenCourseware and doing different things? So this is when our light bulb went on. We're asking the wrong question. So we've been looking at this both in the Causal context and then at OEIT for 6 years now, and it finally came around to hit us in the back of the head to look at it this way. So the Office of Educational Innovation Technology, why don't we create a custom copy of OpenCourseware? Use the Mirror program that Brendan were just talking about, where they put full versions of OpenCourseware out at various universities. And let's take a copy of it. There's an established program to do that. And then let's take it and see what might we build upon it. And all of this still stays within the bounds of the original agreement with the MIT faculty, and certainly within the terms of the license. So everything kind of works out. And so that's how we got to Project Greenfield. Before I talk about Project Greenfield, I'm going to go into what are some other folks doing that you might have heard about in this last year with OpenCourseware. So how many of you have heard of OpenStudy? Okay, small number of you. It's a project that was originally developed out of Georgia Tech and U.S. National Science Foundation funding to build a community resource. And what MIT OCW has done is partnered with OpenStudy around about 9 courses right now to be able to provide a community support for the courses. So if you remember back, MIT OpenCourseware does not provide access to faculty. It also doesn't have a way of connecting up students. So what OpenStudy does is it provides a forum in which you can ask questions, answer questions, get a community dialogue and discourse going. And so up behind me you see a screenshot of OpenStudy. Another project. How many of you heard of NIXT? About the same number, different group of hands though. NIXT is a company that's looking at open educational resources, and what they've done is taken some of the courses from the various OpenCoursewares, and behind me is an example of the physics course from MIT, and they've taken and repackaged the content. And you might be able to read in the circle, there's a notion of progress. So they've taken the course and they've tried to look at the materials that have been made available by the OpenCoursewares and try and say, well, if you do these two things, you've progressed through this content. It's nothing more than that now. It's no additional assessment. It's actually a simple link that you click that says, yes, I've completed this content. But there are all of these folks, both at the local institutions. We were hearing about the folks where there might be a few folks who have been very, very enthusiastic about OpenCourseWare, and then a lot of folks, a lot of faculty at the institution don't know what to do with it. But there are third parties trying to build upon OpenCourseWare, whether it be an MIT or across the OpenCourseWare consortium, to look to magnify the value of OpenCourseWare. And all of these things that I just described from MIT's perspective, they're external to what OpenCourseWare does. OpenCourseWare is a publishing platform and publishing process, and it's a very, very simple integration. So it's a link from a page, or it's taking contents that are already available or using an existing program. So very much like these two examples, we are doing the same things with Greenfield. So over the last year and a half that I've been at MIT, we've had a number of conversations with faculty where they've asked us about different things that they're interested in doing on top of OpenCourseWare. So OpenCourseWare is a publication of the course materials and a publication of their own faculty's course materials, but as a static thing, it's not satisfying even to some of the faculty at MIT and even to the faculty that contributed those materials. Having this large content store and content repository available leads them to ask questions, well, it'd be great if I could put some testing around this where they wouldn't necessarily have to do all of the support for this themselves, but there might be somebody who can help do it, or that they could publish those things out with the course and not just have your lecture notes or videos or copies of old tests. We have a number of faculty who are very interested in different ways of browsing and finding resources through OpenCourseWare. And so coming back to what our office's goals are to help faculty at MIT do innovative things in educational technology. We also have our own thoughts about some of the tools and techniques we can use with OpenCourseWare that might amplify the value for our students and for our faculty. And then what we want to do is to prototype those tools and services. And so once again, it's a focus internally at MIT, and that sort of led us to launching Project Greenfield. And we did this about April of this year. Some of the new developments. So in the last 6 months or so, OpenCourseWare has done some very interesting things, I think, with updating their back-end publishing system and some of the things they're doing on the front end. And then the other thing that's really new, about a month ago, our provost announced the formation of 3 committees at MIT to look at e-learning and kind of education and the educational infrastructure at MIT. One of the committees is looking at distance learning. Will probably end up in some kind of certificate process, or they will end up exploring a certificate process. There's another committee looking at things like 3+2 programs at MIT, where you do 3 years of undergraduate and 2 years of graduate combined together. Looking at doing classes over the summer to make better use of our facilities. And then the committee that I've had the opportunity and the pleasure and the horror of working with, mainly because it's such a short timeline, looking at e-learning for MIT students. And it's sort of deliberately vague, and what does e-learning mean? It could be a lot of things, and that's kind of where we're approaching it from. So MIT is very much a university based on hands-on experience. And you can see how inserting e-learning into that might end up distancing that, but there's some opportunities that e-learning provides. So if you think about a blended learning example where we have all of these course materials available through OpenCourseware, from a content delivery perspective, perhaps we want to make better use of those resources and change our in-person classes to being more hands-on or more interactive. So it's not about content delivery, but it's about expanding the experience of working with world-class faculty, your students from around the world, to have a better educational experience overall. Some of the new developments with MIT OpenCourseware, they've switched over development platforms, which actually means they can publish things and change things a lot quicker than they ever used to be. They've got a new mirror program that's coming out, supposed to be out later this month, so you can get a complete copy of everything. They've improved their interaction with video lectures. That ends up being important because I have another project that I've been working on looking at automatic transcription of lecture video. And so some of their work with improving the way you work with the video lectures that they've made available actually helps us out in being able to do some of the things that we've been talking about. The other thing that's new that hasn't really been announced is OCW Scholar. MIT has received some funding to take a number of the core science, engineering, and math courses and flesh them out a little bit more. So taking the introductory physics that has made Walter Lewin a rock star, being able to add in some more formative assessment that's part of it, rearranging the material so it's not just week 1, week 2, week 3, but it's organized around concepts instead, so you can kind of follow things through a little bit more comprehensively. The first ones are due out in December. I've seen a couple of them. They're much more interesting, I think, cut on the course materials that are available, and I think they actually enable some interesting things down the road. So getting back to the question of what do we want to do with OpenCourseware. We've been talking about this with faculty. Earlier this year I presented a couple ideas. We've made a little bit of progress on some of them. I'll talk about 2 in particular, video and transcript integration and the concept browser. 15 of OCW's courses have full transcripts, 100% accurate transcripts for each of the videos. And the way you interact with it is you watch the video, you can see a closed caption on top of it, you can also read the full transcript below it. Some of the things that we've been looking at with spoken media has been how do you integrate that into the page and see it side by side. It's a slightly different view of the closed caption overlay format, so you see it playing along the side, but some of the things that we can do because of that is we can enable live search throughout the transcript, so you can search for a word, get a result, click on the result. If I have some time at the end, I'll do a demo of hopefully one of those things working. Some of the other things we've talked about, that OCW has a version that they've implemented of playlists where you can take a single video and have segments of that video and be able to search for those segments and then play back and watch the video in those segments. One of the slides that I've used in a previous presentations has been a comment from YouTube where one of the first commenter said it's a 51-minute video, that there's no way I'm going to sit and watch a 51-minute video to try and find the piece of material that I'm interested in. And this also matches up with how our faculty want to be able to use and reuse the course materials and how our students want to use it. They don't want to sit and watch a 51-minute video either. They have a question on a particular topic, they want to go directly to that topic. The other thing is the concept browser, relatively new project. So how do you do a concept-based search through OCW materials? MIT OCW is doing a couple things right now to enable this. They've got a couple projects underway, the OCW Scholar that I mentioned, taking those 10 or 15 courses and dividing them up into concepts, rearranging the material, pulling it all together, adding in learning objectives, adding in formative assessment. Certainly in the case of physics, they're going to be adding in concept questions, so very simple questions, multiple choice questions that say, choose A, B, C, or D, and take a look at if you answered correctly, these are the reasons why the answer is correct. If you answered incorrectly, these are the concepts you may want to go back and take a look at. They're also doing a very, very high-level categorization project, which probably won't be of use for kind of a student perspective. I'm having problems with this particular topic, but it's some kind of categorization data that's kind of officially blessed that we can use to start to organizing things. And so what are we doing on top of that? We're looking at doing search through the videos. So one of the things I skipped over is there are about 15 videos with 100% accurate transcripts for the entire all of the lectures in the course. There are 70 some odd additional courses with videos but without transcripts, and of that 70 some odd, there are about 35 or 33 or so that we've chosen to focus on to use the project I was mentioning, Spoken Media, to do an automatic transcription of them. You get a varying levels of quality. I can talk a little bit more offline about that, but it's not necessarily good enough to use as a caption where you're expecting 100% accurate, but we're going to try using it for search. And the previous research that has been done has shown that it's been effective for search. So let's take those materials, add them in, and let's take a new way of looking at browsing through the materials. So instead of a search box on a web page, let's take a look at maybe an iPad app and being able to browse through concepts, being able to pull out this video. And so we were approached by a Master of Engineering student who was interested in this project, and we're working with him to kind of see how that realizes. And since he's a student and he's graduating at the end of May or beginning of May, he'll have the project done. So there will be something up and functional by May of next year. Let's think big again. So I've said a lot of things that we are thinking about, and this is kind of the transition to the question and answer period. What are you guys interested in with respect to MIT OpenCourse? What things would you like to see OpenCourse do that it doesn't? If you think about taking a copy, making a copy of it, and then doing something with it. So I guess if we could have the house lights come up, and I'll switch to question and answer. I should still have a few minutes, right, Susan? Okay. Any questions, any thoughts about what you'd like to see OpenCourse do that it's not doing now? We have one down front.
So I guess I'd like to see maybe some facilitation of communities of people that have adopted, and maybe some making explicit of, some of the assumptions about maybe why the original course was structured the way it was, or how other people are cutting it up into pieces and adapting it. I guess I'm curious, I have a question for you as well. So part of the value of an MIT education is a lot of the co-curricular activities. So looking in from the outside, it seems like the students are already spending a lot of time on task. And I'm thinking of the meta-analysis that the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, did last year on online and blended learning, which kind of implied a lot of the benefit is tricking students, so to speak, into spending more time on task. And sometimes we see when people blend courses. So if I was an instructor and I used the OCW material to supplant part of my lecture,
right,
I might give up 45 minutes of in-person time, but I ask the students to spend 60 to 75 more minutes online. And are you worried is MIT worried that maybe students will actually end up getting overburdened to the point where you lose the co-curricular benefits like robots, card counting, stuff like that?
So this is where I should mention that MIT students are a unique breed of students. They are already now overburdening themselves, one could say. There are more students than I would have thought that I've run into that are taking 2 classes at exactly the same time. And it's not for financial reasons, but it's because they either want the credit or they need to be able to get into another class that's based off of it. And so I think that that's a concern, but it's a weird concern because of the student population at MIT anyway. And I think you're right, going back to your first statement of, I ran a workshop earlier this year looking at dissemination, and one of the things that everybody in the room there said that they'd love to hear more of is why and how were the courses, the materials developed the way they were, what decisions went into them, as a means of them understanding how they might take those materials and then better make use of them. And then similarly, for them to share back out those things. And these were all folks, as it turned out, who had U.S. National Science Foundation curriculum improvement grants. And the funny thing is they didn't all do the same thing, but they were fairly consistent in agreeing that that's the kind of thing that they wanted to hear, but that's never something we do. We publish the course, here it is, here's the snapshot, or we have a textbook, here's the textbook, here's what it is, that's all that you get. Did I answer enough-ish? Okay. In the middle, Gary.
We know that MIT started out putting a lot of courses online in the OpenCourseware site at various levels of detail and so forth. And one of the things that's beginning to happen in our institution is that people are putting up material that is not a complete course,
right,
looking a lot like early stuff on MIT, but then as they keep adding and adding and adding,
right,
it gets to be richer and richer into the point where, you know, maybe it could be a course and it needs a little bit of more effort. And so I'm wondering about how this sort of slower development, and we talked in an earlier thing about how academics want the final product to be the perfect thing that they show, and they're not willing to wait until it, you know, do something earlier than when it's perfect according to them. I'm wondering if there's any sort of development within MIT to sort of develop a course before your eyes as you go, rather than just waiting for everything to come up.
So I should restate the caveat. I don't work for MIT OpenCourseware. I don't deal with their processes. Part of it's philosophical about, as you were saying, that everyone wants to see the finished product. And the publication process has meant that they wanted to see a finished, completed version. I'd like to believe that what you just described, Gary, is a lot more possible, where you could see courses being published over time and being completed over time. Because, frankly, the technology they were using before was such a bear to use that they couldn't do that, and now they're publishing or republishing. They can do it daily if they wanted to, but every week or 2 weeks you'll see them sort of hit the publish button, a new piece or updated piece of materials will go out. So all of the changes that have gone on with the video lecture pages, which have kind of made them more user-friendly, those have all gone out kind of off-cycle, not when they were ready to go, and not have to wait for this big process. But I don't know where it's going to end up kind of institutionally.
Thank you. My question follows on, I think, quite nicely from that one. And it is, I suppose, so far everyone who's been talking about OpenCourseware has been talking about it almost in a proprietorial sense. That is, it's MIT's OpenCourseware, and but it is available to others. What I'm wondering is whether you have thought about, or whether there are experiments with truly open, like Wikipedia, so that, for example, you can take a half-baked course that some universities develop, get in there and add to it, have users add to it and create, so that it becomes truly a user-created course in the same way that Wikipedia is. Is that something that MIT would consider doing? Before I... you know, the usual objection to that is, well, of course, we lose all quality control. But there have been studies done on the accuracy of Wikipedia, and it actually stacks up quite well, for example, against Encyclopedia Britannica, because no sooner does somebody post an error than somebody gets in and corrects it.
So the non-institutional answer, I think individual faculty are doing that now in their courses. We've actually talked to some in the last couple of weeks where they say they pick and choose materials. There's somebody using some materials from Carnegie Mellon's OLI statistics course, supplementing it with some videos from here, there, and around to help their students better understand statistics. But I don't think from an institutional perspective we're likely to see that out through the OpenCourseware site. But there are other folks that do it in the education space. WikiEducator, Kuriki, they're much more kind of community developed, community focused connections. Lots of contributions from multiple people. You can pull those together into additional courses. So there are other folks doing it in the OER community at large, but I wouldn't expect to see it from OpenCourseware. How are we doing on time, Susan?
We can take one last question. And then if there's time at the end.
I think you know where to find me, Tom.
I also wanted to touch a little bit on when you were talking about these new kind of off-cycle production changes. We've talked a lot about bringing input back into the MIT courseware, but how do you disseminate, hey, there's been a change? If we're talking about taking courseware and creating a snapshot of it, how easy is it for someone to recognize and adopt? What kind of support have you thought about providing as far as when they're being translated into other languages or into other contexts? How does that communication work? Is there any?
I don't have a good answer for you. I do know that with the Mirror program, or the previous version of the Mirror program, where they actually were shipping hard drives worth of content around, that there is provision for updating of those materials. There's an interesting challenge because they completely changed all of their course structures early in May of this year, and so you can't just, you actually have to send another hard drive because there's that much content to get back out again. And I think that's one of the challenges from a publication perspective, that they can't manage versions very well. And even from our perspective of doing this kind of as an after-the-fact kind of thing that everybody else is, it's kind of silly, but we want to take materials that started off in a content management system, put it back into a content management system to manage it again, which is kind of silly if you think about it all the way through. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.